Hello, BookTube. This is the second book that I've read for Hornblower 2023, an event created by Faith and Books. And she invited me along, and we just read Lieutenant Hornblower. And this is the second book chronologically, but the seventh, I believe, to be written. And we get two new and interesting characters. We get Mr. Bush, who is senior, although the same rank, a lieutenant, as Horatio Hornblower. And seniority mattered a lot in the Royal Navy back then, even within a level. And then Maria Mason, who, in a class-conscious culture, we sort of see this convergence. Horatio Hornblower will be a lodger in a house run by her mother, quite a harsh character. And so we'll see that inevitability come into play. But Bush is an interesting guy, Lieutenant Bush, because we get this novel, Lieutenant Hornblower, actually from his perspective. And it starts with him coming aboard, whereas Midshipman Hornblower had started with Horatio Hornblower coming on board a ship. And in this case, it's the Royal Navy warship, the HMS Renown, who is under a horrific captain. Ever since Captain Bligh and all of that Mutiny on the Bounty fame, it's been a thing to draw those types of characters in fiction, but there were plenty of them in history. And this is Captain Sawyer, and the odd thing is he's cruel to his officers and undermines them and not the regular crew, and this has a horrible effect. And Horatio Hornblower has already been on board for some time, assigned to the ship, and when he meets Bush, Bush can't quite figure out what to make of him because he's Hornblower is obviously being very careful, but soon, of course, it plays out and we understand what's going on and why Hornblower is so careful. And then there's a young midshipman that Sawyer really loves to pick on, brutally. And finally, Hornblower, being who he is, takes that young fella under his wing. There is an accident on their way to the Caribbean, and the captain either falls, is tripped, or pushed down a flight from one deck to another and is seriously, seriously injured. And we're never told who did it. There's in our group, our Voxer group, discussing it. Some folks thought it was, an act of God. Some people thought he, when the ship moved, that maybe he fell. I myself think Horatio Hornblower or the midshipman or both had something to do with it. And but it's one of those open questions. You can read the book and decide yourself, or if you've already read it, leave me a note in the comments. But I think they had something to do with it. And there's always a suspicion in everybody else's mind, but, nothing ever comes from it. Well, something comes from it, but nobody's ever assigned blame. There is, once I get to the Caribbean, they open secret orders, because now we have somebody else in charge, and they're to storm a fort in Haiti, and these cutting out these landing operations, I guess is the way I'd want to describe it. Often, if they were done in a way that was quick, resolute, and competent, could really have an impact, because these are forts that were sited to protect a harbor or something. If you came up from behind and went overland or something like that, sometimes you could have a good effect. In this case, the acting commander or acting captain takes him right up in the middle of the bay for some reason. And you can tell Hornblower doesn't think it's a good idea, but he's junior to them. And the forts use hot shot. They heat the shot. And when it hits the ships, it will cause a fire. It's brutal stuff. And it's not something you do from a ship to shore because you're not going to have that kind of fire on your ship. So it's not something the Navy men are trained for, but they know to dread. And of course, running up the bay that he doesn't know, this acting captain runs aground, and then they're really in trouble because they're sitting ducks. But they make their way off and leave, and Hornblower, through some, he's a manipulator. He gets what he wants by knowing how to deal with people. And he manipulates them into trying this assault from behind the fort, and it is a huge success. And the whole time you're watching Bush, who you're seeing Hornblower through Bush's eyes, which is a good thing, because it paints a picture of Hornblower. And Bush gets that the manipulation is going on, but he grows to admire Hornblower. And there's all these adventures where they end up moving a cannon on top of the hill because the Haitians are revolting against the French slaveholders. It's a pretty brutal fight, and then the garrison wants out, and the deal's made. They take them on board as prisoners, have a couple prize ships. Hornblower learns how to do hot shot when they fire, once they take positions and fire back at ships that were trying to escape. And in that experiment, though it goes well, has some failures as well. And they capture and are on their way to Jamaica, I believe, if I remember right. Hornblower has one of the prize ships on the Renown itself. The prisoners escape and they're attacking the crew, and Hornblower he realizes something's wrong, brings the ship alongside, hand-to-hand combat, and they retake the ship, go into port where the admiral is, and they've got prizes. Hornblower has a temporary command, heads back to, as a courier, and is sent back to England, and the Peace of Amiens is signed, and Hornblower's temporary command is not confirmed, and we end up finishing the novel with him ashore on half pay, which is not much, and he plays whist. He has a very mathematical mind, and he plays with some pretty high-powered folk. And peacetime Navy is not an easy place to be, but Hornblower basically becomes a professional gambler. Bush is also on half pay ashore. They run into each other, and this is a way for Bush to paint the portrait of Hornblower again, which is really well done. And then we start seeing Maria Mason, and Bush doesn't understand how Hornblower can get himself into such a situation. But while they're there, they hear the press gang coming, which means war's been redeclared, and we know we're ready for the next adventure, which is Hornblower in the Hotspur, I believe. Let me double check here. Yep, so that'll be this one. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't read any of these in years, so this has been a great, great adventure, and enjoyed it. I really like this volume. Looking forward to the next one, and hope everyone's doing well. Thank you, BookTube.